My name is Leo. I'm 34 years old, and I'm the live-in superintendent for a mid-rise apartment building in a city that's forgotten what quiet feels like. And this is the story of how my wife asked me to be the father of her baby for one day. A baby that didn't exist in a coffee shop I almost didn't go into. It was the most ridiculous request I had ever heard. And I said yes. That's how I ended up married to the love of my life. Funny how things work out, isn't it? But to understand why a man who hadn't had a real conversation in 2 years would agree to fake fatherhood for a stranger, you have to let me back up. For a long time, I was a ghost. My life was a series of silent, repeating loops. Wake up before the sun. Walk the building's quiet halls. Check the boiler in the basement, my kingdom of pipes and concrete. Tighten a leaky faucet in 4B. Replace a burned-out bulb in the west stairwell. Listen to the hum of the building breathing. I was good at my job. I was competent, reliable. The tenants knew if something was broken, Leo would fix it. They didn't need to know the man holding the wrench was broken. 2. My father died 3 years before that day in the coffee shop. He wasn't just my dad. He was my best friend, my boss, my entire world. We ran this building together. He was the heart of the place, the one who knew everyone's story. I was just his hands, the quiet kid who preferred the language of machinery to the messiness of people. When he was gone, the silence he left behind was deafening, swallowed me whole. I kept the job. I kept living in the small basement apartment that came with it. But I stopped living. I existed. I became an automaton of maintenance and repair. I ate alone. I worked alone. I went to sleep alone. The tenants would say, "Good morning, Leo," and I'd nod, the words getting stuck somewhere in my throat. I had switched myself off. It was easier that way, less painful. You can't lose anything else if you stop wanting anything in the first place. My world had shrunk to the size of this building, to the predictable clicks and groans of its inner workings. I was the ghost in the machine. My father had this saying. He had a lot of them, but this one stuck with me even in the numbness. He'd find something cracked. A piece of porcelain, a wooden chair leg, once the frame of an old mirror, and he'd get this look in his eye. "Leo," he'd say, running a thumb over the fracture. "You don't break a thing just because it's already cracked. That's a coward's way out. You find the crack, you fill it, and you make it stronger than before. The crack is what gives it a story." I used to think he was just talking about furniture. After he passed, I started seeing cracks everywhere. In the pavement, in the plaster walls, in the faces of the people I passed on the street. Most of all, I saw them in myself. A fault line running straight through my heart. But I didn't know how to fill it. I didn't even know if I wanted to. It was easier to just stay broken. If you believe that a single moment can change a life, that a quiet act of kindness is more powerful than a loud declaration, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to this channel, because it's filled with stories just like this one. Stories that prove love shows up right when you've stopped looking for it. Now back to the coffee shop. It was a Tuesday. My one day a week I forced myself to leave the building for something other than supplies. I'd walk 3 blocks to a little place called the Daily Grind, order a black coffee, and sit in the corner booth for exactly 1 hour, watching the world go by behind a pane of glass. It was my way of pretending I was still a part of it. She walked in and the air in the room shifted. I had seen her before. Of course I had. She lived in my building, apartment 7A. Clara. I knew she was a graphic designer who worked from home. I knew she always paid her rent on time. I knew her trash was always neatly tied. These were the details a superintendent knew. But I had never really seen her. Not like this. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a kind of frantic terror that seemed to vibrate right off her. She scanned the room, her gaze darting from face to face, and I felt a strange, unfamiliar pang in my chest. A protective instinct I thought had died with my dad. Her eyes landed on me. For a second, I thought she was looking past me. People always looked past me. But no, she was looking right at me, and then she was walking toward my booth, her steps quick and determined. She slid into the seat opposite me without an invitation. Her hands were trembling. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice shaky. "This is going to sound insane. Completely, utterly insane. But I need your help." I just stared. Words were hard for me. She took a deep, shuddering breath. "There's a man who is about to walk into this coffee shop. His name is Julian. He's my ex, and I need him to believe that I've moved on. Completely." I blinked. This was already the most complex social interaction I'd had in years. "Please," she said, her eyes pleading. "Can you just pretend you're with me? Just for a few minutes." I should have said no. I should have just shaken my head and gone back to my silent coffee. That was the old Leo's move. The ghost's move. But I saw the crack in her composure. I saw the story of her panic. And my father's voice echoed in my head. I gave a short, stiff nod. Relief washed over her face, so potent it was almost painful to watch. "Thank you." "Oh, thank you." She glanced toward the door, her anxiety spiking again. "He's coming. He can't see me alone." Then she said the words that changed everything. "Can you be the father of my baby for one day?" I froze. My brain just stopped working. Baby? What baby? There was no baby. I'd fixed a clog in her sink 2 months ago. I'd have noticed a baby. Before I could process it, the bell on the shop door jingled. A man walked in. He was handsome in that slick, polished way that always set my teeth on edge. He radiated a confidence that felt more like a weapon. He spotted her immediately. A predatory smile spread across his face. "Julian." Clara's hand shot across the table and grabbed mine. Her skin was ice cold. "Please," she breathed, her eyes locked on mine. "Just go with it. I'll explain everything. I promise." Her grip was desperate. A drowning woman grabbing a piece of driftwood. And I was that driftwood. Solid. Silent. There. So I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I made a choice. I squeezed her hand back. And then I said, my voice rough from disuse, "Only if you tell me everything." Julian arrived at our table, his smile faltering slightly as he saw our joined hands. "Clara," he said, his tone smooth as silk but with an undertone of steel. "I was hoping I'd find you. I called, but you didn't answer." "I've been busy, Julian," Clara said, her voice miraculously steady. She lifted our hands slightly. "This is Leo, my fiancé." The word fiancé hit me like a physical blow. We were escalating. Fast. Julian's eyes flicked to me, sizing me up. I could see the dismissal in his gaze. My simple work jacket, my calloused hands, my quiet demeanor. I wasn't a threat. I was a curiosity, an inexplicable downgrade. "Fiancé?" he repeated, a note of amused disbelief in his voice. "Clara, darling, you move fast. When did this happen?" "It's been a while," she said, a new strength in her voice. "We've been keeping it quiet. You know how I value my privacy." I could feel the tremor in her hand, even as she projected an image of calm. Julian's gaze was sharp, probing. "I see. Well, congratulations." He didn't sound congratulatory. He sounded like a king inspecting a peasant who'd stumbled into his court. "So what does Leo do?" He said my name like it was something he'd scraped off his shoe. Before I could answer, Clara did. "Leo is a structural engineer," she said, squeezing my hand as if to say, just go with it. "An engineer. Me. The guy who snake drains for a living." The irony was almost funny. "He's brilliant," she continued, her voice warming. "He's actually overseeing the new downtown development." I just sat there, the world's most silent, underdressed structural engineer. Julian's smile tightened. He was losing control and he didn't like it. "Impressive. And you're happy, Clara? Truly?" "I've never been happier," she said, and for the first time she looked at me, really looked at me. In her eyes, I saw a flicker of something real. Gratitude, yes, but something more. A shared secret. A tiny spark of connection in the middle of a massive lie. "In fact," she said, placing her other hand on her stomach in a gesture so natural it stunned me, "we're expecting." There it was. The bomb. Julian's face went blank. The charming mask fell away, and for a split second, I saw the raw, ugly fury beneath. He had lost. He had unequivocally, completely lost. He recovered quickly, the plastic smile snapping back into place. Wow, that's fast. Congratulations again. He gave me one last withering look and then turned his back on us, walking out of the coffee shop without another word. The moment the door closed, all the strength went out of Clara. She slumped in her seat, letting go of my hand. She put her face in her hands and took a long, shuddering breath. We sat in silence for a full minute. The only sound was the clatter of ceramic and the hiss of the espresso machine. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes were filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but you have no idea what you just did for me. You owe me an explanation," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Everything you said." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yes, everything." And so she told me. It wasn't a story about her. Not really. It was a story about her younger sister, Maya. Maya was getting married in 2 weeks. It was supposed to be the happiest time of her life. But Maya was fragile. She had a history of severe anxiety and depression, something she had battled since she was a teenager. She was finally in a good place, engaged to a kind, stable man who adored her. Julian, the man from the coffee shop, was Clara's ex. They had been together for 3 years. To the outside world, he was perfect. Charming, successful, doting. But in private, he was a master of control. A psychological bully. He had slowly, methodically isolated Clara from her friends, chipped away at her self-esteem, and made her feel like she was nothing without him. The reason she finally found the strength to leave him was Maya. Julian had started to subtly turn his manipulative games on her sister, trying to position himself as the only one who understood Maya's fragility, creating a dependency. Clara saw it happening and she got out. She cut him off completely. But Julian didn't let go. He couldn't stand that she had left him, that she had chosen her sister over him. "He's been trying to get back in," Clara explained, her voice low. "Calling, texting, showing up. When he heard Maya was getting married, he escalated. He wants to ruin it. Not overtly. He's too smart for that. He wants to get into Maya's head. Make her doubt herself, her fiancée. He wants to cause a scene, to make the whole thing about him, to prove that I can't protect her. To prove I still need him to manage things." The world saw Clara as the cold-hearted woman who broke up with the perfect man. Her own extended family didn't understand. They thought Julian was wonderful. They thought Clara was being difficult, dramatic. She was completely alone in this fight. "I've been ignoring him," she said. "But he's getting more desperate. I knew he was going to try to corner me before the wedding. I got a text that he was in the neighborhood. Panicked. I just needed a shield. Something that would make him stop. Something that would make him believe I was untouchable. A fiancé and a baby," I said, the pieces clicking into place. She winced. It was the nuclear option. The only thing I could think of that would be a final, definitive end. A new life. A new family. Something he could have no part in. She was protecting her sister. Sacrificing her own peace. Creating a massive, complicated lie. Just to give her fragile sister a safe, happy wedding day. She was taking on the role of the villain in her family's eyes to be her sister's secret hero. She wasn't difficult. She wasn't dramatic. She was a warrior. "He'll tell everyone," I said, thinking it through. "He'll go straight to your family." "I know," she said, a look of grim determination on her face. "That's the next part of the problem. The lie has to hold, at least until after the wedding. Just 2 weeks." She looked at me, her expression a mixture of shame and desperation. Which brings me to the most insane request of all. I knew what was coming. "I need a fiancé," she said softly. "Just for 2 weeks. There's a rehearsal dinner. The wedding itself. I need someone to stand with me so my family directs their questions and their judgment at the situation. Not at Maya. I need a buffer." I need you. There were a million reasons to say no. A million logical, sensible reasons. It was crazy. It was dangerous. It involved people and feelings, and a level of complication I had spent years avoiding. But then I looked at her. I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, but underneath it, a core of pure steel. She was willing to do anything to protect someone she loved. She was standing in the breach alone. And my father's voice was back. You don't break a thing just because it's already cracked. She was cracked. She was holding herself together with sheer force of will. Okay, I said. Her head snapped up. Okay? Okay, I'll do it. I, the ghost of the basement, the man who fixed pipes and avoided eye contact, just agreed to be a fake fiancé and an expectant father to protect a woman I barely knew from her manipulative ex. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than numb. I felt a purpose. The next 2 weeks were a blur of invention. We had to build a world, a whole history for Leo and Clara, the happy couple. We spent hours in her apartment, which was bright and clean and smelled like citrus and fresh paint. So different from my dark, quiet basement world of oil and dust. Where did we meet? She asked, a notepad in her lap. The farmer's market, I found myself saying. I was buying apples. You were trying to decide between Honeycrisp and Gala. I told you to go with Honeycrisp. You told me you preferred a tartar apple. She smiled, a real smile this time. It lit up her whole face. And I was right. Gala was the better choice. You always are, I said, and the words felt surprisingly true. We invented our first date, a terrible Italian restaurant with a clumsy waiter. We invented the moment we fell in love, watching an old movie on her couch. We invented the proposal, spontaneous, on a rainy Tuesday, right in her living room. Somewhere in the inventing, the strangest thing happened. We stopped inventing. We started actually talking. She told me about her dream of opening her own design studio. I told her about my dad, about how we used to work on old clocks together, taking them apart and putting them back together again. She told me about her fear of letting Maya down. I told her about the crushing silence of my apartment. I was learning the topography of her, the way her brow furrowed when she was concentrating, the way she chewed on her lip when she was nervous, the way she had this quiet, fierce loyalty that she hid from the world. I was coming back to life one conversation at a time. The moment I knew I was in real trouble, the moment I knew this wasn't a game anymore, happened on a Thursday. We were walking back from the grocery store, carrying bags filled with food for a family dinner she had to attend that weekend, the first official presentation of me as her fiancé. I was dreading it. As we approached our building, we saw an elderly woman, Mr. Henderson from 3C, struggling with her own groceries. A paper bag had ripped, and a cascade of oranges was rolling across the sidewalk. She looked flustered, on the verge of tears. Before I could even move, Clara had set her own bags down. Don't you worry, she said, her voice gentle. We've got this. She knelt down, gathering the runaway oranges with a calm efficiency. She didn't act like it was a chore. She didn't make a big show of her kindness. She just did it. She spoke to Mr. Henderson, reassuring her, making a small joke that made the old woman smile. I watched her. I saw the way she carefully checked the remaining oranges for bruises. I saw the way she helped Mr. Henderson repack the surviving groceries into one of our sturdy reusable bags. I saw her walk the woman all the way to the lobby door, carrying the bag for her. She did it all thinking no one was paying attention. It was just who she was. She walked back to me, a faint blush on her cheeks. Sorry about that. Don't be, I said. In that moment, she wasn't the woman with the crazy plan. She wasn't the damsel in distress. She was just good. A fundamentally good person doing a good thing when no one was watching. And I realized I didn't want to just pretend to be the man who loved her. I wanted to be him for real. The first test came 2 days later. Julian. I was in the basement, organizing some plumbing supplies, when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I turned, and he was there, leaning against the doorframe, that same predatory smile on his face. So this is where the brilliant structural engineer works, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Among the pipes and the dust. I didn't say anything. I just wiped my hands on a rag and met his gaze. I don't know what your game is, he said, stepping into the room. But I know Clara. She doesn't go for this. He waved a hand around my workshop. She likes success, ambition, not grease monkeys. I stayed silent. My dad taught me something else too. Never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. Whatever she's paying you, he said, pulling out a thick wallet. I'll double it. Just disappear. Be gone before the rehearsal dinner on Friday. He fanned out a stack of $100 bills. I looked at the money. Then I looked at him. I could see the desperate need in his eyes. The need to win. The need to control the narrative. I finally spoke. My voice was low and even. You think she can be bought? Everything can be bought, he scoffed. And you think I can be bought? I continued, taking a slow step toward him. I wasn't trying to be intimidating. I was just closing the space. You think her happiness, her peace of mind, it all has a price tag you can afford. He faltered, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. This wasn't going the way he'd planned. You don't get it, I said, stopping a few feet from him. You see her as something to own, something to break. You look at her, and you see a possession you lost. I leaned down, picked up a small, cracked gear from my workbench, and held it in my palm. I look at her, I said, my voice dropping even lower, and I see something worth protecting. I held his gaze for a long moment. The silence in the basement was thick and heavy. He was the one who broke first. He snatched his money back, stuffed it in his pocket, and backed away. You're making a mistake, he hissed. No, I said as he turned and fled up the stairs. I'm fixing one. I stood there for a long time after he was gone, the cracked gear still in my hand. The rehearsal dinner was in 2 days. The real fight was about to begin. The rehearsal dinner was held in the private room of a fancy restaurant. The kind of place with cloth napkins and too many forks. I felt like a crow in a flock of peacocks. I wore the one suit I owned, the one I'd worn to my father's funeral. It felt both too big and too small at the same time. Clara's hand was a constant, warm pressure on my arm. You okay? She whispered as we walked in. I'm here, I said. It was the truest thing I could offer. The room was buzzing with conversation that stopped the moment we entered. Every eye turned to us. I could feel the judgment, the curiosity, the outright disbelief from some of Clara's relatives. Julian had done his work. He'd been planting seeds of doubt, whispering his version of the story. He was there, of course, standing next to Clara's mother, looking for all the world like a concerned, heartbroken friend. He gave us a sad, magnanimous smile, the snake in the garden. We navigated a minefield of passive-aggressive questions and thinly veiled insults. A structural engineer. How fascinating. Julian tells us you two are expecting already. Such a whirlwind. An ant chirped, her eyes sharp and bird-like. Sometimes when you know, Clara said smoothly, squeezing my arm. I just nodded, playing my part. The strong, silent type. It wasn't much of a stretch. Maya, the bride-to-be, was a delicate, sweet-faced girl who radiated a nervous energy. She pulled Clara aside, and I saw her whispering, her eyes wide with worry. I saw Clara reassuring her, a look of fierce love on her face. She was a shield, a living, breathing shield for her sister's happiness. The dinner was an exercise in tension. Every conversation felt like a cross-examination, but Clara was magnificent. She was poised, she was calm, she was unshakable, and I stood by her side, a silent anchor in her storm. I didn't offer witty retorts. I just met every suspicious gaze with a steady, unwavering look of my own. I kept my hand on the small of her back, a simple, grounding touch. Then came the toasts. After a few heartfelt speeches for Maya and her fiancé, Julian stood up, a glass of champagne in his hand. The room fell silent. "I'd like to propose a toast," he began, his voice smooth and charming. "To Maya and Tom. To new beginnings," he paused, his eyes finding Clara across the room. "And to second chances. And to the surprising paths life takes us on." His eyes were locked on Clara. The whole room felt it. "Sometimes," he continued, "we think we know what's best. We build walls, we make rash decisions, thinking we are protecting those we love." He was talking about her, painting her as reckless and impulsive. But true love, true connection is patient. It doesn't need grand, dramatic gestures or sudden, shocking announcements. He was calling our entire relationship a lie without saying the words. He was framing her as unstable. I felt Clara tense beside me. "It's about history. It's about knowing someone's soul. And I just want to say, Clara," he said, raising his glass to her, "wherever this new path takes you, I hope you find the happiness you're so desperately searching for." It was a masterpiece of public assassination. He had painted her as a desperate, unstable woman and himself as the noble, heartbroken man wishing her well. He had weaponized their history against her. The narrative in the room solidified. Clara was the problem. Julian was the victim. A knot of cold fury tightened in my stomach. Clara looked pale, defeated. This was the attack she feared most, the public erosion of her character. And then, I felt it again. My father's voice. "You find the crack, you fill it." Julian had created a crack in her story. A big one. Before anyone could react, I stood up. I wasn't a public speaker. My heart was hammering against my ribs. But I had to do something. I picked up my water glass. I didn't trust myself with champagne. "I'd also like to make a toast," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Everyone turned to look at me, the superintendent in the ill-fitting suit. "I'm not a man of many words," I started, and a few of Clara's cousins smirked. "So I'll be brief." I looked at Julian. "You're right. Love is patient. It's not about grand gestures." Then I turned my gaze to Clara. I didn't see anyone else in the room. "But you're wrong about what love is," I said, my voice finding a new strength. "It's not about history. It's not about owning someone's soul. That's not love. That's possession." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Julian's smile was frozen on his face. "I haven't known Clara my whole life," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "But I know what matters. I know she's the kind of person who will stop in the middle of a busy street to help a stranger pick up their dropped groceries. I know she works tirelessly to protect the people she loves, even when no one else sees it, even when it costs her everything." I was talking about Mr. Henderson with the oranges, but I was also talking about Maya. Clara knew it. Her eyes filled with tears. "Love isn't about knowing someone's past," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's about seeing who they are right now in this moment, and wanting to be part of their future. It's about seeing their strength when they feel weak. It's about being their quiet place in a loud world." I raised my glass. "So this is my toast. Not to second chances or surprising paths, but to Clara, the strongest, kindest, most fiercely loyal woman I have ever met. I didn't find her because I was searching. I found her because I was lost, and she is my way home." I took a sip of water and sat down. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't judgmental. It was thoughtful. People were looking at Clara differently. They were looking at Julian differently. His charming narrative had a crack in it. A big one. Under the table, Clara found my hand. She laced her fingers through mine, her grip tight and sure. She leaned in and whispered, so only I could hear. "That wasn't pretend, was it?" "No," I whispered back. "Not a word." The wedding was beautiful. Maya was radiant, her anxiety a distant memory. She floated down the aisle, her happiness so pure it seemed to light up the whole church. Clara, her maid of honor, stood beside her, a quiet, steady presence. The shield had held. After the rehearsal dinner, something had shifted. The family's prying questions stopped. The looks of judgment softened into something more like respect. My quiet speech had done more than defend Clara. It had reframed her. They saw her not as a drama queen, but as a protector. They saw me not as some strange interloper, but as a man who genuinely loved her. Our lie had become so convincing, it had somehow circled back around to truth. Julian was a ghost at the wedding. He was there physically, but his power was gone. People were polite to him, but distant. The charm had worn off, revealing the ugly mechanics beneath. He left early. Later that night, after the last guest had departed, Clara and I stood on the patio of the reception hall, looking out at the dark hills. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and leftover champagne. Our job was done. The pretense was over. "We did it," she said softly. "You did it. Thank you, Leo." "You were the one who was brave," I said. An awkward silence fell between us. The end of the script. We were just Leo and Clara again. The superintendent from the basement and the designer from 7A. "I guess I should," I started, not knowing how to finish the sentence. "Go back to my basement? Go back to being a ghost?" The thought was unbearable. "Leo," she said, turning to face me. "I don't want to go back." My heart stopped. "Back to what?" "To before," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "To pretending you're not the first person I want to talk to in the morning and the last person I want to see at night. To pretending that what you said at the dinner wasn't the most real thing I've ever heard." She took a step closer. "This isn't pretend for me anymore. I don't know when it stopped being pretend. Maybe it was at the farmer's market we never went to. Or maybe it was watching you talk about old clocks. But it's gone. It's just real." I couldn't speak. I could only feel. The numbness that had encased my heart for 3 years was cracking, melting away under the warmth of her gaze. "I'm falling in love with you, Leo," she confessed, her eyes shining in the dim light. I finally found my voice. It was raw and it was honest. "Clara," I said, reaching out and gently touching her face. "I'm not falling. I'm already there. I think I have been since you told me you preferred tart apples." A tear slid down her cheek, and she laughed, a beautiful watery sound. "Gala apples," she corrected softly. "Gala apples," I agreed. And then I leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a fake kiss for an audience. It was quiet and it was real and it was everything. It was the end of the lie and the beginning of our truth. At 1 month, she brought a box of her things down to my apartment. "It needs some light," she said, and hung a bright, colorful painting on my bare concrete wall. It was the first piece of art the basement had ever seen. At 6 months, we knocked down a wall and combined my apartment with an adjacent storage space. I did the work myself. She designed the layout. We argued about paint colors and the placement of the sofa. It was the happiest I had ever been. We filled the space with books and plants and the smell of her cooking. It wasn't a basement anymore. It was a home. At 1 year, on a rainy Tuesday, I took her to the farmer's market. I bought a bag of Honeycrisp apples and a bag of Gala. We sat on a bench, and I watched her take a bite of a Gala, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she smiled. I didn't have a ring. I hadn't planned it, but it felt right. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the only thing I had. A small brass washer I'd been meaning to use to fix a dripping hose bib. It was mundane. It was practical. It was me. "Clara," I said, my voice shaking a little. "I know this is crazy." She looked at the washer in my palm and her smile widened. "My whole life," I told her, "I've been fixing things. Leaks, wires, broken hinges. But I was the most broken thing I knew. And then you came along. You didn't try to fix me. You just moved in, and you brought the light with you." I held up the washer. "This is all I have right now, but it's a promise. Promise to keep fixing things. To be your anchor. To build a life with you that is strong and true. A promise that I will love you for the rest of my days. Will you marry me, Clara?" Tears were streaming down her face, but she was beaming. "1,000 times, yes," she said. She let me slide the ridiculous brass washer onto her finger. Fit perfectly. A few weeks later, we got news. Julian had been fired from his job. An internal investigation revealed a pattern of financial misconduct and harassment. His carefully constructed world had imploded. The truth had come out all on its own. Clara was vindicated, completely and totally, without ever having to say another word. It's funny. I started this whole thing thinking I was saving her. That I was the strong, silent man stepping in to rescue the damsel in distress. I thought I was her shield. But I was wrong. I was the one who needed saving. I was a ghost, haunting the halls of my own life. I was a man living in a basement, surrounded by things that were broken because I felt broken, too. My world was gray and silent. And then she walked in. She didn't just ask me to be her fake fiancé. She asked me to be seen. She looked at the quiet man in the corner that everyone else ignored, and she saw someone she could trust. She brought color into my gray world. She brought conversation into my silence. She pulled me out of the basement and into the sun. I thought I was fixing a crack in her life, but all along, she was filling the massive, gaping one in mine. She saved me. She just did it so quietly, I didn't even realize it was happening. My father always said you don't break a thing just because it's already cracked. You find the crack, you fill it, and you make it stronger than before. Clara didn't see me as broken. She saw the crack, and she didn't fill it with pity or plaster. She filled it with love. She filled it with life. She made me stronger than I ever was before. She gave my life a new story. And that's the real truth. The most important things are never really broken. They're just waiting for the right person to see their value. What about you? Have you ever had a moment where a stranger's quiet kindness changed everything? Let me know in the comments below, and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story. So let me ask you this. When you see someone who the world has written off, someone who seems broken or lost, do you walk away? Or do you stop and see if maybe, just maybe, they're the one who's there to save you? Tap that like button if this story resonated with you. Hit subscribe for more stories about how love finds us in the most unexpected ways. And turn on that notification bell so you never miss a new beginning. My name is Leo, and that is the story of how I met my wife. Build something good today,